Uh-oh. Guess I better get to the boat first. Here we go again. Uh-oh, look out, he's got coffee. Or coffee on the go. I think we got some update emails. We have another email. I have a feeling it's going to be quite interesting. Not that any of them aren't. Well, sometimes we get the odd one that might not be overly interesting, but it doesn't really matter, does it? Now, here is an update, a reply email to an email we just read. All right. This is titled 2 NDEs and a Sasquatch sighting regarding your comments. All right. In regards to the points you made, the sighting lasted for at least 30 seconds, as I first saw it from far down the road, and it did move. And it did move in all that time, or did you mean it didn't? Perhaps you're right, and it froze while I was way down the road. So you meant didn't. I have experienced street light interference from a half a block away. And, excuse me, they can detect the same life force energy from some distance. But as I mentioned, I have since read of other sightings of them seen actually catching fish in this manner. Slider syndrome seems to be a lot more powerful when one is meditating. I once talked to an electrical engineer about the streetlights, and he said mercury vapor lamps become very sensitive to extra energy input as they age. That energy would be the loosh, L-O-O-S-H, life force all living beings emit. The Sasquatch ability to create instant non-rational fear ties in perfectly with the Gnostic belief that we are literally being harvested by archon interdimensional beings of our life force when we are stressed, such as being invisibly stalked on the way out of the woods, stone throwing, or pounding on buildings. All create fear, and fear is the emission of the life force energy according to the ancient Gnostic teachings. Perhaps they are shapeshifters and use the giant hair man. Sorry. Just the odd missing punctuation kind of screws me up in my delivery to you guys in reading. Perhaps they are shapeshifters and use the giant hair man as it is a good tool to get us scared. They behave like the classic native trickster being that does disturbing things to get our fear reaction. Literally psychic vampires. In regards to fairy abduction, there are hundreds of years of such accounts from the UK. The time of the Brigadoon movie is just that. Oh, I'm thinking of theme. Couple typos. THYME. The theme of the Brigadoon movie is just that. If you eat or drink anything in the other world, you can never come back through the veil. The veil between the worlds is very real. Been there, done that. End of the email. I have a feeling you are right on the veil between worlds. I think so too. It's very confusing and a little alarming at the same time, isn't it? There you go. Thanks for the reply, man. Appreciate that. And people whose wheels are turning are going to take in what you said and look into it deeper. This next one was titled UK Wild Man. Hi, Steve. In late December 2017 in England, I was traveling from Exeter to Bristol City on the train across country in a place just outside of Bristol called Malvern. Malvern, M-A-L-V-E-R-N. There is a lush area with green fields and lots of woodland. Excuse me. I was sat in a train carriage of probably half a dozen people, and I had this sudden urge to stand up and look over to my right. And as I did, I hone in on a large black figure walking down the side of a field, away from a forest, probably 150 to 200 yards away. As if I wasn't stunned enough at this point, I took a deep breath, continued to look, and about 3 fields over were a couple with a collie dog at approximately the same distance. I just experienced a wild man or woodwose, aka Bigfoot. The couple with the collie dog, I could tell you were probably mid-40s. The male's around 6 foot, the female probably 5'5". I could see them as clear as anything in their anoraks. But what I just seen before 3 fields away on the train was huge. Massively wide in the shoulders and bulky, possibly 7 to 8 feet tall. I'm pretty confident to say that certainly in this carriage. I am pretty confident to say that certainly in this carriage. I was the only one to be looking out the window at this time. Whether anybody else saw it or not on the other carriages, I have no idea. This is just one of many experiences in South England. The Sasquatch is here in the UK, as it is across Europe. We just have a slightly different name for it here. There are stories here in the UK of Robin Hood and his merry men being chased out of the woods by 7-foot-tall hairy men. Many tales and stories from the UK talk about the green man, the hairy man, the man of the woods. I believe they are all talking about the same thing. Stephen used my name. I couldn't give a monkey's what anybody says. People need to wake up and realize this. There's more going on in this world than what we've been told. Big time. I believe also there may be a massive spiritual war going on, but that's another story. I believe that as well. I also have a buddy called Steve. He has a few strange experiences as well. I'll get him to email you. 10 out of 10 for the YouTube channel. I tune in every day to listen to your viewers' emails. You've certainly given us a safe place to share our experiences. Regards, Guy, Tristan, Southwest England. Appreciate you, Guy. Big time, man. Big time. Yes, I do believe as well there is without a doubt a spiritual war going on. It's not a movie. It's not a fairy tale. It's not a made-up story. Some crazy-ass shit going on. Crazy. Crazy, crazy, crazy. I'll bite my lip because I could go off on those topics quite a bit. So let's keep repping. Now, I wouldn't have found this email unless I hadn't glanced at my messenger inbox. I think I mentioned that yesterday, the day before, or whatever. I don't do the social media thing. I just don't. And then I went into my inbox, messenger inbox, and there's literally hundreds of, it's called message requests. I just clicked on one, and sure enough, it was a man named, Matthew Brown. And he said he had sent me a very interesting email, but I didn't get it, so I searched, and I found the email in one of the inboxes, and it had already been opened, so maybe it had been copied and pasted previously. I don't know. Either way, I found it. So, here we go. This is titled 53 Years Finally Told Her Story. Hi Steve, my name is Matt. You may use my name. After 53 years, my mother finally told me the whole truth of her and my father's sighting. I've asked her to tell me for more than 40 years, never getting more than her breezing over the subject, and, quote, "Oh, it's in some Bigfoot book, I think," end quote. Well, here it goes. All names have already been published and free to use. Quote, "Your dad and I, Mr. and Mrs. Richard Brown, lived in a trailer park on the outskirts of the Dalles, Oregon, called Pinewood Mobile Manor. This happened on June 2nd, 1971. At the time, Richard worked as a music teacher at the high school. We, Mom and I, had come back to the trailer park from doing some babysitting in town, and as we parked the car, noticed the maintenance guy named Joe Madario looking quite agitated. I asked him what was wrong. He was stumbling all over his words. Finally I said, "Show me." And he led us to the entrance to the trailer park and pointed across the street. Joe said something like, "It's back again," and pointed across the field to a tree. At the base of the tree sat a huge, hairy creature covered in grayish-brown fur. And just then Richard, my husband, came home from his choir practice at the high school and saw us standing there and asked what we were looking at. He looked out across the field and then took off to the trailer for his rifle. He ran back up to the road and watched it through the rifle scope for more than 5 minutes. As he watched this thing, it stood up next to the tree. Its head was several inches above the bottom branch. It was later determined to be nearly 10 feet tall. The creature turned around and slowly strolled away, and effortlessly walked up a draw in a rocky outcropping and disappeared over the top. Richard nearly shot it. He said he had started squeezing the trigger but stopped when it started walking away. He said it didn't walk like any animal he'd ever seen, ever. And he was an avid hunter. He said that it moved like a human, smooth and fluid. It was because of that he couldn't pull the trigger on it. We all kind of stood there dumbfounded at what we had seen. Joe, the maintenance man, said he had seen it the day before with the 3 owners of the trailer park and another guy. They all had seen it from the office trailer when they were having a meeting. It, the creature, was in the same spot across the street in the field. Richard said it looked to be about 8 to 10 feet tall, heavily built, and very solid looking, covered in long grayish-brown fur over its entire body, and weighed maybe 600 to 800 pounds. The distance from the road to where it sat under the tree was paced by Richard at about 150 yards. He said he could clearly see it had reddish-orange colored eyes through the 8-power scope from that distance. Wow. 150 yards with an 8-power, you got a good look at it. It had shook up Joe so badly, he said it was something evil. He later moved to Portland. The sheriff was called out, they looked around and left too. It was about a week later and some men showed up and knocked on our door. They introduced themselves as Renee DeHinden, Peter Byrne, and 2 others who were filmmakers from BC or California, who she didn't recall their names. Renee said they were camping in Washington near Mount St. Helens investigating a sighting that occurred over the previous summer, when news of our sighting reached them. He said they tore down camp and immediately headed for the Dalles. We told them what we saw over dinner. Richard and I took them across the way to the tree by the outcropping. The Bigfoot investigators looked around for footprints. None were found. None were found, and the ground there was very hard, rocky. Lots of scrub grass. They measured the height of the tree limb and figured out the creature stood about 10 feet tall. The mom then told me My mom then told me it was her holding me, 13 months old, under her arm that led them up the draw along the path the creature took. That's always been how my mother is, tenacious and unwavering. She said, quote, they were completely exhausted when they got to the top, oftentimes having to crawl because of the steep incline. No further signs could be found. De Hinden and the brothers wanted to do a film, which we declined to do. They went back to St. Helens after not being able to find physical evidence. Peter Burns started a Bigfoot information center in town, the Dalles, Oregon, and came to the house for dinners often, discussing other sightings he'd been involved with investigating. He became a good friend up until we moved across the United States. Thanks, Steve, for giving my mom an outlet. She's kept this story bottled up for far too long. All right. And then you included what looks to be a Google Earth photo of... Is that going to focus in? Yeah. So that's the little town. There's the street where they looked from, or the trailer park where they looked from on the street, across the field into that tree. Interesting, right? And there you go. There's another one. You imagine how many people Renee and Peter Burns spoke to over the years. You imagine? I wonder what their stance was on... I wonder what deep down, back in the day, what their position was on what these beings were, what they could do, what they couldn't do, and if they were adamant. I think that Peter Burns was a big game hunter, wasn't he? Global big game hunter, I think. But I wonder if they, I mean, there's no way. There's absolutely no way back in the day that all these innocent human beings didn't tell them the crazy ass shit they saw while having these experiences. There's no way they didn't. So I wonder what those little farts did, how they reacted when people would tell them. Track stopped. It disappeared. It was 4 feet wide and vanished behind a 12-inch tree. I wonder what those guys did with those reports, or how they reacted, right? I wonder. Be interesting to hear what their stance was then compared to what we know now, due to people being able to speak openly and freely. And nobody... You see, back in the day, all those guys are taking in these reports. And only them are the ones basically sharing them to the world somehow when they got a chance. So, a lot of people probably did not get their full details shared publicly. That's what I'm saying. Don't you think? Until now. Now it's a whole new game, right? It's called the honest game. Now, I think I had a whole bunch of unread in this one folder here, and I gotta find them again. There's so many. I can't believe how many freaking emails I've shared. It seems like yesterday when I started doing this, but uh-oh, here's one. Okay, here we go. This is titled, She Followed Me and Mare Back to Our Farmhouse. Thanks, Steve, for being you. You're a godsend for many of us. Your insights and your sharing of emails concerning Sabe have given me peace concerning 2 days that changed my life. All right. Appreciate the kind words. And this place is nothing without you. All right. The morning after I shared my Sabe scare with my husband and father-in-law, they laughed at me. Only decades later, when I found your YouTube site, can I now face and share those 2 days. And so now I ramble on. Probably a too long of email. No, it's not. Let's get this going. First, let me share my second of 3 meetings with Sabe that occurred in August of '81, upstate New York on the PA border. That's Pennsylvania. As a dairy farm wife, I finished my morning chores, breakfast, and then went for a ride through the countryside on my Arab mare. We competed in many 50-mile competitive rides and were always training. While riding through my neighbor's deep woods, my mare became extremely upset and wanted to run away. It was all I could do to rein her back to a controlled gallop. Upon reaching the nearby dirt road, she kept turning to run towards home. She was beside herself with angst. So, I cut our ride short and returned home. My mare was never herself after our ride that morning. She was terrified to leave the pasture. That sucks. Later that afternoon, there was a severe thunderstorm, which is not uncommon in August on our hilltop farm. I remember being drawn to the front corner living room window. I thought it odd. I'd never sat in that chair, but I was usually too busy doing chores. Within seconds, swoosh, I saw a large yellow lime green neon ball slide down the outside farmhouse wall 2 to 3 feet from me. 2 to 3 feet from me. No thunder. I asked later if the men had heard loud thunder as they were milking in the barn at the same time, and they had not. 11:30 p.m. that night. My husband and I and my daughter are sleeping when I hear a large thud on the side of the house. My first thought is drunken neighbors hit my house with their car, as they have drove into favorite choke cherry tree months earlier. Color me a B, an unfeeling, as this couple I never liked walked into my house that night without knocking, as front doors were rarely locked in the country. Offered them some rolls of sterile paper towels, which they refused. They were insulted. Their bloody noses dripped across my new carpet. While bothered, grabbed a new set of white guest towels to wipe their noses, enchanting as they spewed drunken cuss words at me in front of my young daughter. I was thinking, why me again with that couple? Really? Holy shit. That'd be pretty bizarre to picture that if a drunk couple came strolling into this house with the girls in the house, they probably wouldn't be leaving on their feet. No matter who it was. I hurried towards the front rooms when another thud made the large beams in the farmhouse creak loudly. It felt like the farmhouse moved. Did the drunk neighbors back their car up and hit my home again? My husband and daughter did not wake up. I was annoyed and was hoping to head off this couple before they bled all over my home again. So, am I a terrible person? Sorry, so I am a terrible person. I do not care what people think. These were not good people. No problem. No explanation needed. They probably would have been in caskets doing the same thing here. I turned the lights on in the front room when I was frozen in place by the loudest sound I've ever heard. It was a woman's scream, like from the slasher horror movie. I thought someone had slit her throat. But no one screams with a slit throat. I was confused. Her scream vibrated my innards, and then a second scream. My innards and whole body felt wobbly. My first thought was the farmhouse would have not saved me from her tearing me apart, whatever she was. The words, the idea of Bigfoot/Sasquatch were not in my vocabulary. Steve, I never thought she was a Sabe until I watched your videos decades later. Not once did I ever imagine she was looking through the large window, watching me while she was screaming at me, until I listened to Native American stories on how to hunt. I could barely turn my head towards the kitchen, where my .22 rifle was leaning against the wall, unloaded. Never a hunter, I have dispatched many foxes with distemper. I do not want to shoot a woman and could not. My second thoughts were, a .22 would not stop whatever was going to happen. My husband and daughter were mere feet away, and they did not wake up. I called loudly to them, but no answer. The front rooms are 16 by 16 and 20 by 16, and she was 27 feet from me outside the window where I'd earlier seen the yellow lime green orb. And she is now closer to my daughter's room than me, as my daughter's bed is under the outside window. I've never told my daughter this story. I'm like a mama bear concerning my daughter, but immediately I felt a sense of calmness that she was there for me. I was filled with a feeling of being blessed by her interest in me. In honor, she had followed me home. How weird is that? I had no fear of harm coming to my family. I'm a bit psychic and became more psychic after this experience. As an animal whisperer, I sent mind-speak questions to her. No answers to my questions. First, I saw she sent a video of me being watched as my mare and I galloped through my neighbor's woods, where my mare had become hysterical earlier in this day. The angle of this video was being seen from the side hill by our trail in an area we never entered. I thought that's odd. Excuse me, when another video started in my mind's eye. I'm seeing another neighbor's sweet miniature donkey running up to a dark, tall figure. The angle of this mind's eye seeing was from deep into the pasture. This is from an angle I'd never been to. I saw a large, dark arm reaching for my donkey friend, and I gasped. Immediately, all contact with her was lost. Suddenly, I was freed from my frozen trance. I opened the front door as I heard two more loud women's screams coming from deep into the pasture woods. Across the road, past the cow barn. She was several hundred feet away within seconds. She left the window, crossed 3 new strands of barbed wire, or a metal gate. How? My 2 horses, pony, and a herd of 50 dairy cows, plus some young stock were in the pasture, far to the left of her in the woods. My horses and cows were crowded in a corner by the road and fence. I feared our animals' safety. I knew there was nothing I could do to help them. No, I did not sleep the rest of the night, but sat on guard for my family. When my husband woke in the morning for milking and chores, I waited until his morning coffee was finished when I mentioned the screams and my fears for the animal safety. In one sentence, my husband of 13 years reduced our marriage to me being a hired hand. I was shocked and speechless. My husband then asked why I did not wake him up, and I asked why he did not wake up with all the noise and me calling to him. Okay, I'm the calm one who handles emergencies without turning into screaming memes. I did have a vision of my husband running around willy-nilly grabbing guns with no ammo, as he had done before when we caught 2 teenagers stealing gas from the farm tank late at night. I gave the teens a tank full of gas to drive home. She told me that she'd be gone if my family woke. No one would believe me. Point taken. She made me feel we were safe. After telling my husband, I hurried to the barn to check on the animals as they entered the barns. I felt when I heard her scream in the woods, there was nothing I could do then to protect our animals. I felt terrible about that. Thankfully, all the animals were safe. My mother-in-law laughed at me when I started retelling my late-night experiences. After chores of all my neighbors around us, I hurried to my donkey friend's farm. Only a few times in a decade had I stopped to chat with that farmer, but on numerous rides, my mare and I made special visits to our sweet donkey friend. The miniature donkey would run to the top of his pasture to greet us. This day, that donkey was not in his pasture. I found my neighbor in his driveway and I asked if something was wrong. He slowly told me something, approximately 8 feet tall, hairy and dark, grabbed the donkey. When the little donkey tried to defend his herd. At dinner time the night before, the farmer recalled, the family heard a commotion out by the barn. That week, numerous chickens, ducks, and geese had been killed. So the men grabbed their shotguns and took off running to their barn. They saw a tall, dark, hairy man grab the donkey and break its neck. That thing walked away with the donkey under its arm, stepping over their stone wall as if it was not there. My neighbor asked me if I believed him. Of course I did. I asked if he believed me when I told him about my night before, and he believed me. My neighbor believed me, and my husband and father-in-law did not. This farmer continued to tell me his family has seen orbs of light crisscrossing on the side hill by his house. The same night, his son and son-in-law were out coon hunting with their dogs when the dogs took off crying, running back towards home. The men walked further up the tractor path to the hayfield when they saw a UFO zoom up to the sky. I was shaken and crying over the death of my donkey friend and hurried home, frightened and not knowing which route to take home safely. Upon arriving home in our driveway, another fella, a local farmer, was chatting with my husband and father-in-law, all leaning against his pickup truck. My men were laughing as the man told a local farmer's daughter's adventure last night. This woman is held in high esteem locally, as was her family. She had missing time from the night before while driving on the dirt road where my mare refused to go the day before. A bright light came closer to her car as the car sputtered and stalled. She remembered nothing until 4+ hours later as she was driving on another road, some distance out of her way. I wanted to share my encounter and the farmer's donkey story, but MPE felt as an outsider, hired hand. Typo. But MPE, what was that? Anyway, but felt as an outsider, a hired hand. I did not feel my input would be wanted. This was the day I began to feel isolated. I do not blame the Sabe woman for my life changes. I became anorexic, lost 50 pounds, to finally stop losing weight at a mere 89 pounds. No one noticed. I isolated myself from everything and everyone except work. Within a year, I divorced. That's a sad story, but then again, maybe it's a good story in the end, right? Who needs a douchebag, weak-ass pussy for a husband like that? My third encounter. Years later, while walking by the river several miles from the farm, I heard her scream twice from the steep wooded hill nearby. I smiled and felt the acknowledgement she had found me. I walked faster back to my house. Never once did my brain acknowledge her being a Sasquatch until I watched How to Hunt. I never once asked myself what/who was her scream. That's odd, isn't it? My first Sasquatch encounter, ? At age 4, was this a Sasquatch? I was living at my aunt's and uncle's home in the country. The house on a 1/4-acre lot was surrounded by hayfields with nothing more for a 4-year-old to do. With nothing for a 4-year-old to do. Around 5 p.m. each night, I would stare across a hayfield towards the creek and wooded steep hill. A loud, beautiful songbird was beckoning me to come and see the creek. When I asked my aunt if I could go play with the bird, she pooh-poohed me until my aunt became upset after hearing this bird for several evenings. No one had ever heard a local bird sing a song like this, nor this loud before. One afternoon, my uncle took a shotgun to the hill and fired several shots. We worried as he returned late that night. Everyone whispered secrets, not letting a 4-year-old know the truth. The mysterious bird never sang to me again, never calling me to come play at the creek. No longer could I enter the yard alone, and was to stay on the concrete steps by their front door when outside alone. Strange? Okay, whatever, as I was a 4-year-old. 45 years later, I visited my aunt and uncle in Orlando, Florida, and asked my aunt about my bird friend. Her eyes popped and stammered for me to ask my uncle. 2 aunts and uncles were startled and became upset as they declared nothing. Nothing happened. And they did not want to talk about it. Everyone walked away from me. Did my uncle shoot a Sasquatch, wound a Sasquatch? I have no answers, only questions. Is all this connected? How was I not telling or writing about my encounter when I worked for a TV station, magazines, and newspapers? How and why did I not realize it was Sabe screaming at me that night? My neighbor described a Sasquatch taking his donkey. I saw it in my mind's eye. After all the Bigfoot articles I have read for many years, and so many videos I've watched on Sasquatch, I never faced reality until the How to Hunt channel on YouTube. I question everything, always, but I never acknowledged my encounters as being with Sabe. Is the mind controlled by Sabe? Maybe someone's listening. Maybe someone listening has my answers. There you go. What a lifetime of frickin' mystery. Events. Sad story. There's nothing worse than realizing you don't have backup, right? I mean, when you pick a partner, when you end up with a partner, fall in love with somebody, you're with your backup at all costs, right? That's what I've made clear here in this house. This is to be the safest place on the planet for every single person who lives here and each other. Period. No matter what. That's what it's supposed to be like. That's what it is like here anyway. That's what I hope all of you and all you men out there are playing your role of making sure that's the deal, right? Your home is the absolute most safest place no matter what, and your partner should be too. So it just kind of sucks to read that about how that ended. But at least it ended. You know, there's always a positive in everything, right? I mean, it just sucks that sometimes it takes such a long time for somebody to figure out they don't really have the backup. Sleeping beside him in that bedroom, the sacred zone, right? But at least you got to, you were able to realize that and get that sack of shit out of your life. Instead of having to be beside that pussy for your whole life. Anyway, I guess that's a bit of a babble, but I have a bit of a sore spot there when it comes to not having that solid backup in your most sacred, safe place, which is your home. Believe me, I know that one. I know that one. Is it all connected? Without a doubt. The bright lights in these beings connected? 110%. You can't deny that fact after having that shared with us thousands of times in the past. But here's the other part. We have a good handful of solid people who have researched this topic for over 30 years and making it clear you can't trust them. And they can be very, very deceptive and misleading. Do I think that's true? I can't dictate shit, but my gut's telling me that that's probably true. Right? You can't come into somebody's home, somebody's private land, somebody's private space, annihilate their pet. Let's face it, a donkey isn't raised for meat, not like cattle and chickens. But how does one come into somebody's private zone, human zone, get across to them this warm and fuzzy feeling, everything's cool, and then turn around and break the neck of a frickin' donkey in the same, not the exact same property, but in human zone, and then walk away? That's a little contradicting, isn't it? I mean, you probably could have went out and grabbed a deer or a moose or an elk or whatever the hell's around there, right? Dirty pool. But that adds fuel to the thought, the possibility that no matter how warm and fuzzy you think you're having a relationship with these people, they could be very, very deceptive and pulling the wool over your eyes. You never know. But so far, and I've had that told to me a lot, so far it just seems to be true. And another thing that makes me believe that is nobody so far is having a sit-down, full, fluid, back and forth question, period, with one of these people. It's not happening. They still remain mysterious, hidden, out of view, and given tidbits. Like any lying son of a bitch would in our world. Right? Now, what's this one? A follow-up on 859-pound bear and a tale of a scream that scares the crap out of us back in 1962. Thanks for what you do. I appreciate what you're doing with the channel, as it has helped me possibly understand some strange experiences that happened in the past. I'm the guy who wrote the story about not what to do when you have a bear less than 10 feet from you. More comments from the story seem to center around the 859-pound black bear that I saw than the bear that climbed up the tree on arm's length in front of me. In Pennsylvania, any bear harvested must be taken to Pennsylvania Game Commission Bear Check Station, where the bear is aged and weighed after it's field dressed, which is what the estimate live weight is based on. We saw that bear in Hickory Run State Park in the Pocono Mountains, about 200 yards from the Pennsylvania Turnpike. It was in a thick patch of rhododendron, which I believe is how we were able to sneak up so close to it. I do have a story that happened to my whole family back in the fall of 1962 in Potter County, Pennsylvania. We had a hunting camp on state land right off of the U.S. Route 6 in a ravine between Denton Hill and Commissioner Run, about a mile west of the Denton Hill ski area. More on the relevance of that location later. We took an evening ride doing one of our favorite pastimes, spotting deer. We had a 1960 Dodge Polara station wagon. Which had a rear-facing back seat, with my three brothers sitting on the closed tailgate facing forward. We were on Thompson Road, almost back to where it ends at Route 6. There's a deep sloping bank to our right side, and my dad was shining the spotlight on some deer in an open area and an old orchard to our left. That is when we heard the loudest blood-curdling scream right on the bank next to us. In about 2 seconds, my brothers were back inside of the car with the rear window already going up. It sounded like a woman screaming bloody murder, with a volume that resonated inside of the car. My dad, a World War II vet, swung the spotlight back to see what made the scream, as it made 3 more blood-curdling screams traveling behind us and slightly up the hill. Each scream lasted for several seconds, not short, maybe 3 or 4 seconds long. We never did see what it was, but it sure scared the crap out of all of us, except my father, who, after my mother yelled at him, "Sonny, get us out of here," he did finally get the car moving. That was the talk the whole trip, with Dad saying it was probably some sort of a cat. My parents and sister, who was my oldest sibling, are gone now, but my 3 brothers and I remember it like it was yesterday. And we still talk about it, not convinced that it was just a cat. In 2002, I moved my family to Potter County, and my work had me travel all over the county, which is over 2/3 state forest land and very wild country. One afternoon, I had a juvenile mountain lion cross the road 20 yards in front of me. This is on Route 44, also known as the Cowder Sport Pike, about 3 miles northwest of Carter's Camp. Now they tell us that there are no mountain lions in Pennsylvania, but I know a lot of people that have seen them, including myself. I stopped to see a friend who is a researcher for the Eastern Puma Research Center to tell him what I'd just seen. During our conversation, I told him the story from back in 1962, as I had heard that cougars have a scream like a human being murdered. I've heard of a fox scream and have since heard a bobcat scream, and what we heard was neither. I've not heard a live cougar scream, so I have nothing to reference their scream except an online scream, which sounded too faint to make any judgment from. What Roger told me set me back, as I don't know what to say. He said, quote, "You do know what else it could be as they are here," end quote. I didn't know what to say, as he showed me a cast footprint. I easily identified it as a human footprint about size 8. He shook his head in acknowledgement, then showed me another casting, asking, "What is this?" It was about 15 inches long with 5 toes, but much wider than a human with no arc. Only what looked like a break where the arc should be. I asked him where he took that cast, and he pointed back up the dirt road behind his place. He made the cast in the 1990s at a location that is only a little over a mile from where we had our experience back in 1962. I'd never heard of Sasquatch until the mid-70s. Even then, I thought if they do exist, they're only out west in the Cascades or BC. Most recently, I did go onto the dog shit website, I'm going to refer to it as, to see if there were any sightings in Potter County. To my surprise, there were 4. One was in '04 on Route 6 at Denton Hill, crossing about the 200 yards from our old hunting camp. I do not know what we heard back in 1962, as I've never heard a cougar scream, except online, and that was not a good representation of what we heard. I'm not saying that we heard a Sasquatch, but I will not say that it was a cougar either. I did have one of those quiet moments in the big woods when I was in my teens, and all I had with me was my .22 Magnum. I felt like I was being watched, and I had a feeling that I needed to change the direction that I was traveling, which I did. Strange how I forgot about all that until I listened to you saying to follow your gut, which is when I suddenly related to what you were saying. Again, I'm not saying that I was stalked by a Sasquatch, but it does make one more aware of your surroundings. If you ever get to Western Pennsylvania, look us up, and we'll throw some steaks in the grill. Thanks again for what you do, Roger Late. I hope I didn't butcher your last name, Roger. I appreciate you sending that, and especially the invite too, man. I've been to the Poconos. Long time ago, I was there. All right. I had something to say, but I forgot what I was going to say. And a bunch of you are probably sighing with relief, right? Let's move on to the next email. Man, I appreciate you sending that email in. Here's another one. Last one for the day. Hi. My name is Kim Justice. You can use my name. I live in southern West Virginia, 15 minutes from Virginia and 25 minutes from Kentucky. I'm 37 years old, and I've lived around close in this area my whole life. I was raised country, and we were made to play outside and get dirty and go into the mountains. It was home, and that's how I liked it. I was pretty much a tomboy, and I couldn't wait to go to my aunt's house where me and my cousin Bradley were always finding somewhere to play, build tree houses, anything we could find to get into. While out in the mountains exploring one day, we ran up on a huge rock up on top of the mountain. We climbed up on top. It was like a blanket of moss. Covered this rock. It was awesome. We enjoyed playing with matchbox cars, and we're always building rock houses and roads to our houses. Well, this summer we had hit the jackpot. This rock was the best. We called it our little town. We named it Bedrock. Over the next few days, we started packing all of our cars up there. It was probably about 1 hour and 15 minutes hike to get there, but it was worth it. We made road signs and roads. Our houses we built out of small rocks with some yards, and some yards had pools. I mean, we worked on this little place like it was a real summer job. Anyways, it was the most fun I ever had as a kid. My aunt brought us a disposable camera, and we did have pictures, but her house burnt and the pictures were in there. We started noticing when we would leave and come back, things would be different, moved around, but it didn't seem like there was any reason for the changes to have been made. Eventually, we had took most of my cousin's matchbox cars up there, and we had it all set up like things were open for business. Then we came back to a bunch of rocks in a stack on top of the rock. They definitely had been there before, and there was footprints all over it, bare footprints. I often wondered if it was a Bigfoot. Had he watched us all along building our little town? And maybe he just wanted to build him a little house. And my family still don't believe in Bigfoot. Now where I live, I'm the barefoot queen. But even I had shoes up there in those thick mountains. Sorry, let me read that sentence again. But I even had shoes on up there in those thick mountains. Briars and needleweed everywhere, and you never know when you're going to step on a snake. He was kind of spooked about somebody being up there barefoot and leaving all those rocks. So we hardly went back after that. I'd say that was 25 years ago. Okay, skip forward, 2019. I was out gin singing and lost track of time, and then when I started to come out of the mountains, some way I got turned around and I ended up having to spend the night. That sucks. I tried to sleep, but that really didn't happen for me. But as soon as it got daylight, I found a holler and started to follow it out. As I was walking along by myself and nervous and aggravated and hungry, I looked up, and directly in my path is about a 6-foot tall Bigfoot. I'm 5'9". It was barely taller than me. I think the Bigfoot was helping me to go the right way. I saw a big X made directly in my path. So I just quickly turned around, and when I got out of sight, I ran. Good thing I found my way out pretty soon, but now I don't have to guess whether or not Bigfoot is real, because I got a up close and personal with him. He may not have been the biggest one out there, but I'm glad it wasn't a big one, because Junior was big enough for me to have ran up on. But I felt no bad vibes, and I don't think I snuck up on him. I think he intentionally was right there in my path, and I think he knew I was looking down and paying no attention, and he just didn't want me to go the other way. But anyways, there you go. Thank you so much for the letters you read, and thanks for your channel. Well, I'm glad you got that off your chest to share it publicly. And there's another one. Another club member. Oh my God, is there a pile of unread emails here? Yeah, so far, I got a funny feeling the only way you can surprise them is walking along water, I think. I figured that out a long time ago, before I ever, just after, everything's been such a mystery to me, right? Non-stop mystery since seeing that thing watching me from the top of that rock, feeling all the hair in my arms, my whole body standing on end every time I went through that pass on top of the mountain, feeling vulnerable, putting together the sounds I heard with my friend when we were going straight down those cliffs to retrieve that deer, and all those years I thought it sounded like a garbled pack of wild dogs closing in on us from straight down, and now I look back at where we were. Not a chance. And then my grandfather telling me what he saw face to face in broad daylight in July on Vancouver Island. The mystery has been firmly embedded in my noggin, and trying to figure out how, right? And how they avoid us, how we don't sneak up on them. And me with a hunter's mind of trying to figure out everything about every animal. How they react, where they go, how can they be elusive, how. I applied the same thoughts and questions to this mystery far before any of this or the internet or speaking about it with anybody. Way back when I come up with, all right, something's going on. Something's going on that blocks them from sensing our approach. And I always thought it was either going to be aggregate between us and them, and the only reason I thought that was because of the forest ground my grandfather was on. Then it dropped down to a bank, and then that put that being down here squatted over the creek. So that means at one point there was dirt between, full dirt aggregate between my grandfather and that being. This is my thoughts way back in the day. We're talking years ago. And then so I figured it was either going to be the ground itself that prevented them from sensing our approach, or something to do with a creek or a river. I don't think lake water has the same effect. I don't think so. There's been too many people who've seen these people on the edge of a lake, and they're looking at them or screaming at them or throwing rocks, whatever have you. But we haven't had anybody surprise up close one of these people on the edge of a lake or a pond. It's always a river or a creek bed. Always. So that was my that was a big question for me. Which one is it? Which one is it? Because one of those two is a factor when it comes to us approaching them without them knowing it. It's either the creek, river rock, or just plain flat dirt aggregate. between us until we're above it, and then boom. Right? Which one is it? But it should tell you what, sure puts you on edge, puts me on edge when I'm walking up creek beds and river beds, which I do a lot your average year. And I can't, I mean, I've had my most up close personal experiences with grizzly bears alongside creeks, rivers, and rushing water. That shouldn't be a surprise though, because almost all game animals, here's something that somebody may find this interesting, all game follows water. Don't know why. Even the deer around here, the black-tailed deer around here, you get in the coastal mountains of British Columbia. I mean, if I was a prey animal, I would avoid following water running at all costs, because the sound of the water drowns out my ears, being a prey animal, right? Drowns it out. It's usually thick. The wind's going downhill almost all the time next to the cold water, no matter what time of year it is. It's usually thick willow and thick forest timber bushes beside the river waterways. It's just such a natural, perfect place for any predator to jump your ass if you're a prey animal. But they do it. They do it. Those prey animals follow those waterways up and down the mountains nonstop, even tiny ones. Anyway, and that's going to be why the predators do the same thing. But there's a creek right over here, crosses the road. Cats, big cats, follow that creek way nonstop, back and forth, over there. They don't go through my yard nonstop. They go through the thick cover, but predominantly along the water. Most everything follows the water in the timber. Why is it? What I'm getting at is, that's why my senses are on fire when I'm walking along creeks in the timber. Absolutely, because of these beings being commonly, easily walked up on without them knowing it, or bumping face to face. I'm very aware of that when I'm in the timber alone walking on a creek. Very aware. And as well, predators, natural predators are cruising along that water as well. And it's a very high probability you're going to have a face to face with numerous different species while stealthily walking along a river or creek in the timber. Here in BC anyway, British Columbia, Vancouver Island, big time. How would you avoid a detour that? I guess if you're just a hiker, I'm guessing if you want to hang bells off your backpack, I guess I could do it, but who wants to listen to that shit all day, every step, right? And they'd have to be a loud bell, not just those little cheap tin jingle bells. That's not going to do nothing, right? Anyway, I guess the only bell you could have would be the same bells we put on the horses, which are very loud, and they have to be, but that would drive you absolutely insane having one of those hanging off your backpack. Best thing to do is, if you can, if you need to walk along a creek bed or a river, hope that the wind's at your back. That'll solve everything. Just put the wind at your back for wild predators. But walking straight into it, into the wind on a creek, alarm bells. Senses on fire. Lots of times when I'm walking along a river or creek bed with the wind in my face, and I know I'm not hunting, I'm not trying to be stealthy, but I'm just moving along, and I don't normally walk loud ever, but I will say out loud, all right, if you're a bear and you're up there, I'm right here, and that's usually enough to make any bear bolt, right? So anyway, there you go. What am I doing today? Me and Rich Germeau are playing back and forth, trying to find a time to have a sit down. I emailed Robert from Swan Lake. I emailed him yesterday, I think. Don't know if he's cracked it open or not. Waiting for his reply. And I got 3 other people in my notes here that I dug up that wanted to share here with me, and I need to contact them. And that's it for right now. I'm babbling away, aren't I? Sarah put some new goodies in her store. What else? I think that's probably it. Probably it should suffice for today. Keep sending me in that knowledge. Keep sharing it with the world, all right? There's so many stragglers out there who are listening, and they just can't seem to come forward with their experience. It's too bad. It's unfortunate. But if you've been following this channel for any amount of time, you should probably know by now it's a pretty safe place to do it, right? Pretty safe place to do it. Getting the truth out, no matter how crazy it sounds. I know I'm done with the bullshit of of the mainstream society. It's such a lying frickin' shit show going on. Isn't it? I have a zero tolerance for the bullshit. Frustrating. We're getting there. I'll be back tomorrow.